Rafael Nadal expressed what millions tennis fans were already thinking when he appeared on live television. Alex Eala was deemed fortunate by Aryna Sabalenka. Nadal gave it a completely other name. You can be sure that everyone in the world paused to listen when the greatest tennis champion in history chose to speak up for a 20-year-old Filipino girl. The tennis world hasn't been the same since because of what transpired next, which started a firestorm rather than just a dispute. This is not just a tennis story, so stay tuned. Whether the world number one wants to acknowledge it or not, it is about respect, legacy, and one girl who earned everything she owns. You must first comprehend Alex Eala's identity and, more crucially, her background in order to comprehend why this moment struck so deeply. Because no one was given this story. This tale was constructed in the small Spanish town of Mallorca, brick by brick, loss after loss, early dawn by early morning. The Rafael Nadal Academy is located there. And that is where a young girl from the Philippines showed up at 12 years old with a racket, a dream, and zero guarantees that any of it would ever work out. The Philippines' Quezon City is where Alex Eala was born. She wasn't descended from tennis royalty. She was not fast-tracked into the system the way some of the European prodigies are. She spent years honing her footwork, her left-handed serve, and her ability to read a match like a chess grandmaster rather than a power hitter after earning a position at the Rafa Nadal Academy via sheer talent. The U was won by her 2022's Open Girls Singles Championship, but the WTA Tour? That was a whole other universe. The doors continued to close for a long time. Qualifying round exits at Grand Slams, a rating stuck far outside the top 100, the kind of chilly, thankless stretch in a tennis career where most players quietly walk away. She persevered despite suffering 6 big qualifying losses. Then came Miami 2025, which had a global ranking of 140 and was a wild card entry. She was not given a real chance by anyone outside of the Philippines. However, her purpose for traveling to Miami was not to survive. She was here to make a point. She defeated former Roland Garros champion Jelena Ostapenko. The current Australian Open champion, Madison Keys, was defeated by her. She then effortlessly defeated world number 2 Iga Swiatek, 62-75, in one of the most stunning upsets in WTA 1000 ever. Eala stated, "I'm just in disbelief right now. I'm so happy and so blessed to be able to compete with such a player on this stage," in her encore interview following her victory over Swiatek. Her eyes were big and her voice was shaking. In Miami, the audience exploded. From Manila to Miami to Madrid, the Filipino diaspora, dispersed over stadiums, living rooms, and phone screens, erupted more loudly. The man who taught her everything experienced a surge of pride that he was unable to contain while watching from home in Spain. But hold on. What was Aryna Sabalenka doing during this whole ordeal? That's where the story takes its first unexpected turn, so stay with us. This is Aryna Sabalenka's problem. She is among the WTA Tour's most brutally honest, unvarnished, and straightforward players. She is charming in part because of that. For the past few years, she has been one of the most captivating characters in women's tennis because of her unvarnished, fiery realism. She expresses her opinions. She doesn't sugarcoat, and you respect it most of the time. However, there are instances when the same unfiltered mouth fires before the intellect catches up. Sabalenka was directly questioned about Alex Eala's breakthrough run in Miami during a live television panel discussion, a post-tournament broadcast roundtable with current and previous players. The inquiry was straightforward, but Sabalenka's response was anything but. She shrugged, she laughed, and then she spoke the words that would ring for weeks, that Eala's Miami victory felt more about chance and the draw than about something truly special. Given how Swiatek was playing that day, the victory shouldn't be overstated. That although Eala's level was encouraging, being dominant and promising were two completely different things. That once the best players received footage of Eala, the tour would change and she would have difficulties. Was it a violent personal attack now? No. Was the framing dismissive? Of course. Because Sabalenka spoke reverently about her own Miami Open victory, which she won in a dominant manner by defeating Pegula 7-5-6-2 in the final, during that same interview. She talked about putting forth a lot of effort, managing stress, and earning what she deserved. However, the word luck was used when discussing a 19-year-old who had just defeated a 5-time Grand Slam champion while playing hurt in the semifinals as a wild card and rated 140th in the world. It was instantly picked up by the internet. Clips spread in a matter of hours. Eala is currently the biggest attraction in women's tennis, surpassing both Sabalenka and golf, according to former player Sam Querrey, who made this claim on the Nothing Major podcast. Steve Johnson had likened her impact to that of Xiao Fonseca. And now the top-ranked person in the world was sitting on live television and wishing it luck? Everywhere in the world heard the remark, but particularly in Mallorca, Spain, where a retired champion was there and had some remarks to make. Drama is not Rafael Nadal's style. It is crucial to comprehend that. Throughout his career, which included 22 Grand Slam victories, the man seldom ever made fun of anyone. He didn't engage in press conference warfare or subtweet. His next move struck so differently because he was the type of champion who prevailed by deeds rather than words. The first social media post was a reshare of Eala's on-court interview in Miami, where she broke down after losing to Pegula in the semifinals. Her voice cracked and tears filled her eyes as she informed the fans that she had given it her all. Nadal reshared it, no caption needed. The message was very clear: this child is not fortunate. Everything revolves around this girl. However, the internet did not break at that particular moment. The incident happened during a live broadcast of a Spanish sports show where Nadal was a guest commentator. He was questioned about Eala's development, her potential, and the mentoring he had given her since she was 12. He was clearly proud of her when he talked about her. After Miami, he remembered the first time she messaged him, or, more accurately, the first time he messaged her. For the first time in his life, he had personally contacted her through a private message. She claimed that her phone was so overloaded with notifications that even Rafa's message was overlooked, thus she didn't notice it for days. And then, unprompted, the host brought up Sabalenka's broadcast comments. The story of luck, the idea that Eala was better than she actually was because of the situation and the draw. Nadal hesitated. He didn't grin. He stated something along the lines of, "Nobody who beats Iga Swiatek 62-75 as a wild card ranked 140th in the world is lucky," looking straight into the camera with the cool, collected authority that only comes from a man who has won Roland Garros 14 times. That is preparation, not chance. That is both talent and bravery. Furthermore, I believe that when people imply differently, they are unfair to a young woman who has dedicated her entire life to this. He did not mention Sabalenka by name. He didn't need to. Every journalist in the room, every home viewer, and every fan who clipped and shared the video in a matter of minutes were all aware of the particular person he was addressing. In less than 48 hours, the video received 10 million views. Every platform was overrun with Filipino fans. Journalists covering tennis from all across the world offered their opinions. Even though Sabalenka's remark was dismissive at the time, it quickly made headlines in all of the world's leading sports publications. Since the plot was just getting started, this is when things got more complex. One of the most heated fan-driven disputes in women's tennis history ensued. Because there was more to this than a single remark and retort. This turned into a much larger issue regarding who is respected in women's tennis, how rising stars from non-traditional tennis markets are viewed, and whether the incumbent elite are at ease with the prospect of being supplanted. With such ferocity, the Filipino community mobilized. The tennis world has never seen anything like it. John Isner, a former American professional, had already stated it clearly. On the women's side of the game, they have a star at last. Some enormous markets have unrealized potential. All they need is for players to step up and establish themselves, and Alex has done just that. Every AILA game was transformed into an event by the Filipino fanbase, which is spread throughout Southeast Asia, the US, Europe, and the Middle East. There are only standing rooms in Miami, Dubai, and Australia. They were now standing in a new manner. Within hours, the hashtags were all over Twitter. Trended concurrently in Spain, the Philippines, and the US. Social media was used by former professionals. Journalists covering the Miami Open wrote in-depth articles explaining why Eala's run was the furthest thing from lucky, pointing out that she had won 25 break points in the competition, that her return game was regarded as one of the best in Miami that week, and that despite playing with a strapped thigh and a mid-match ankle turn, she had taken Pegula to 3 exhausting sets. Sabalenka's followers, meanwhile, resisted. They contended that she had not been malevolent, that she was merely offering an honest, competitive evaluation, that she had complimented Eala in previous interviews, and that the internet had transformed a subtle remark into a villainous plot for the world's top player. And that was also true. Sabalenka is a contender and one of the best in the world since she is not a villain. A player who had experienced her own storms, controversy, and public scrutiny and emerged from them stronger and more determined. She was more familiar than most with what it was like to have your accomplishments called into doubt. However, the internet was unable to let go of the idea of understanding what it feels like and then doing it to someone else. That blind gap, that paradox. Furthermore, the story solidified in the lack of any public explanation from Sabalenka. Now that everyone was watching, the question was what would happen next. The entire talk would be defined by what transpired next. This is what Alex Eala failed to do. On social media, she refrained from retaliating. She did not criticize the world number one at a press conference. She didn't act dramatic. She didn't have to. Rather, she traveled to Eastbourne and qualified for a WTA final. She visited the United States Open and defeated Clara Tauson 1-5 in the third set to force a tiebreak and win 7-6 in the third, 13-11 in the breaker, becoming the first Filipino player to win a Grand Slam main draw singles match. Not fortunate, not coincidental. Elite-level competition from a 20-year-old who is still discovering her potential was icy and astounding. She sobbed during her on-court interview following her devastating loss to Maya Joint in the Eastbourne final, despite having match points. Nadal also shared that footage. Because there was nothing more eloquent than a young woman sobbing at that moment, not out of weakness, but because of how much she had committed and how much she cared. Then, in 2026, she entered a WTA 1000 event as a seeded player for the first time, ranked 31st in the world. By the time the Dubai Open rolled around, she was defeating Jasmine Paolini, making it to the quarterfinals, and drawing packed houses to every event. She spoke candidly at her press conference after suffering a crushing loss to Coco Gauff 60-62 in the Dubai quarterfinals. In the end, there is undoubtedly still a level difference between Coco and other players of her caliber and me. Just accountability, clarity, and the kind of self-awareness that champions possess. No spin, no excuses. This girl knew exactly where she stood and was performing the harsh, unglamorous task of closing the gap. She was not riding luck. Sabalenka and... Eventually, she deliberately and succinctly addressed the matter, admitting that her remarks might have come across as harsher than she had intended. She refrained from offering a formal apology. Depending on who you ask, that may or may not have been sufficient. However, the dominating narrative had already been formed by Nadal's response, that moment on live television, and the evidence had supported it match by match and point by point. There was one last question, and it was the most important of them. What is the true meaning of this story? Because it is too simple to conclude that a budding star is being defended by a well-known legend. The surface is that the tennis community has been secretly battling this issue for years, but Alex Eala's ascent has now brought it to light. Geographical issues have always plagued women's tennis. A small corridor of Europe and North America is typically home to the players who control the discourse, marketing deals, primetime slots, and magazine covers. It is referred to as talent when a player from that route emerges. It needs to be explained when a player from Southeast Asia defeats 3 Grand Slam champions after rising from a wild-card place. It must be put in perspective. The term lucky must be used to qualify it. Nadal was aware of this. He didn't say it in those exact words. He didn't have to. However, he made a statement about what respect looks like in tennis and what it looks like when it is lacking during that live television moment. Since she was 12, he had seen this girl train. He had witnessed her defeat. He had witnessed her self-reflection. He had witnessed her stay. After Miami, he wrote her a private message, the first one he had ever sent her, because he understood the significance of that run for tennis as a whole, not just for her and the Philippines. Alex Eala was essential to the sport. It required the courtside excitement, the standing room-only audiences in Dubai, Miami, and Australia, and the unadulterated, intense, and very personal investment of a whole country witnessing one of their own on the international scene. When he contrasted Eala's impact with Zafanseca's pole on the men's side, former professional Steve Johnson stated it aloud on the Nothing Major show. It's crazy. It's enormous. It's crazy how many people she is currently receiving from all over the world. Sam Querrey concurred, describing her as the best attraction in women's tennis, surpassing both Sabalenka and golf. The trajectory is now indisputable, regardless of Sabalenka's agreement with that assessment or if the world number one ever fully considers what her remarks set off. Alex Eala isn't a wild card anymore. She is no longer a tale of good fortune. She is a Wimbledon competitor, a seeded player, a Grand Slam main draw winner, and a cultural phenomenon whose influence on women's tennis is already enduring. The world heard Nadal's gasp. Starstruck and chasing a legend, the girl who chased him through a Madrid airport years ago is now the kind of player that legends defend. And it is not fate. Rather, it was created one arduous practice session at a time. We would want to leave you with this inquiry. Leave a comment below with your response. Were Sabalenka's remarks just frank, competitive assessments, or was there something more awkward going on? What does it say about women's tennis that the world didn't really pay attention until Rafael Nadal? Rafael Nadal was not necessary for Alex Eala to feel validated. That was already done by her racket. However, it mattered that the greatest champion in the history of the sport stepped up on live television and declared, "This is not luck, this is real," in a world where respect is not always freely given, especially to a 20-year-old wildcard from the Philippines. Even if Sabalenka is the most popular person in the world, Eala and the man who had faith in her before everyone else did had the chat that day. You already know this channel is unique if you've made it this far. Highlights are not what we do. Box scores are not what we do. We share the backstories of the scores, the drama, the emotion, and the talks and career-changing moments. The next story we tell might be even greater than this one, so if you enjoy that kind of content, press subscribe immediately and enable notifications.